mean, this time of year, I feel like everyone's a little questionable. Actually, I have you to thank a little bit, because I think having to put this all in perspective and like maybe kind of anticipate like having this conversation, I realized I probably started slacking a little bit as far as like making time for talk therapy and like the usual things. I think I definitely built a better foundation on my own in quarantine as far as like knowing like what strategies in a day work for me versus habits or pitfalls that I can tend to give into. But I feel like there's always like a certain amount of anxiety just this time of year with holidays and like even subconscious trauma that we're not necessarily aware of, but for some reason it's just like internally we start having like a resurgence of feelings and sense memories that come up. But I do think that I've gotten better at identifying that and then asking for help. Fundamentally, it's kind of a demonstration of self-love and self-care. I think taking that time out of my day to just sit at the mirror and put on all these fun products, starting with skincare, of course. I think in a way it's just like applying the theory that like I'm worth this time and I'm worth this energy and effort. And I think when you invest that in yourself, it shows just in the way you carry yourself, not even necessarily if someone else can appreciate the finished product as much as you can. But I think it also ties into kind of my history of coming to terms with my sexuality and my gender identity and honestly my mental health altogether. I used to have a tendency to pick my face at night, and I think for me makeup kind of started out as almost like a secretive ritual, and I used to always kind of put this mask on and I couldn't let anyone know that I was wearing makeup. So, I mean, how good I was at it, it's anyone's guess, but I think it was always just almost like cringy kind of let me hurry up and do this before anyone sees me in the bathroom kind of thing, and started out with my mom's old makeup, which was clearly not the right shade. But I think as I got older and had more experiences that inevitably gave me opportunities to lean into who I was meant to be, I was able to transform makeup and make it more of a tool and a device for me to kind of show who I was instead of hide who I was. And I got to kind of just sit in the mirror every day and choose like, okay, well, how am I feeling? And I'm gonna take like a reading of myself and then be like, okay, how do I want to show that to the world? Is that gonna be brown or black mascara? Is that gonna be maybe a little color in my cheeks? Or maybe it's just a nude face? And then I think it helps me to assert who I'm gonna share with the world that day. Well, I think it kind of started, my mom was a huge baker, like growing up, like typical Italian mother, baking Christmas cookies, and so there was always like the smells of like sugar and vanilla kind of in the air growing up. And to be honest, it kind of came up more in quarantine. I think just having some more time, you know, isolated, home alone, I think it forced me to get creative as far as, okay, what am I gonna do besides staring at a screen all day? And I found like doing things to like keep my hands dirty or away from a technological device was kind of the best means of maintaining some more sanity.
Yeah.
And I think that even translates into cooking rather than, I mean, I have a guilty sweet tooth, so like baking is definitely the first choice, but I think just being able to get creative and make more intentional choices about what I'm going to nourish myself with feels like another demonstration of self-love and self-care, because it's not just going the easy route, which I think anyone's schedule can attest to is sometimes necessary, but to take some energy and invest it. I think that's probably what it all boils down to. I think the most valuable resource that we can give ourselves, as Oprah says, is time. And I think that's something that no matter how much money you have, you can't buy more time. And so to find an activity that takes a little bit more of that, like preparing your own food or putting on your own makeup or, preparing yourself for the day, that's just a physical way of investing in yourself, saying, I am worth this time. My puppy is a ball of energy, and I think it definitely offered a lot of growth in me when I first got him, because it was super stressful to have to get up on someone else's terms. And I think that kind of put me into, something more of a regular pattern as far as waking up when he has to go to the bathroom and then using that time to start my day and figure out, okay, well, if I'm already up, what am I gonna do with this time? And then if we do end up going back to bed for another hour or so, we can do that together. But I find it's so much more enriching to just take advantage of those moments that he and I have together. And so a lot of times that looks like me having my coffee, because thanks to him, I need that. And a lot of times he doesn't need coffee, so he'll just be bringing a toy while I'm just slowly sipping it, and I'll just throw the toy across the room and we'll play fetch. And every now and then, whenever he brings it to me, I'll make him pay the piper and give me a little bit of a snuggle or some kisses or whatever I need to get, just to fully prepare myself for the day. No, actually I think working on Never Have I Ever really transformed my relationship with that identity, because I, as an actor, always felt like it was something I needed to hide. And it was probably the first day of shooting the first episode for that show, where I just went into my usual routine where the camera was placed behind my shoulder, and I was like, oh, this means I probably have to take my hearing aid out because it's more visible from behind. And I wasn't completely sure what the framing was, so I just turned to the assistant director and tried to get confirmation. And she, I love her, her name is Daniela, and she had worked on several Mindy Kaling projects up to that point, so I think her wheels were spinning as soon as she heard that request from me, and then she disappeared weirdly to Video Village, where the directors and everybody, the producers, were sitting. And she just came back and she's like, nope, they would like for you to keep your hearing aids in. And I was just kind of confused, and then I realized, oh, I guess I felt like the odd man out on this show up until that point, because I was the white boy, even though I was, internally aware that I was also fitting my own minority demographic boxes. But it just was a great way to feel like I was still unique and special in my own way. And I think that kind of offered me a platform to then take responsibility of realizing how representation really does matter. And I think that was something that I'd never really reflected on, because I think growing up, seeing representation, even just as a queer person, was something that was a little limited, but also something that I couldn't fully appreciate when I was trying to hide who I was. And I think having to reprogram my perspective of that came with a certain degree of responsibility, where I was like, okay, I need to go all out and I need to speak about this, because who knows what it could offer somebody else. And I think I have gotten lucky. I've had some people reach out to me thanking me for being open about it, and it's empowering. For sure. I think something that I've learned just over the years is how easy it is for me to get lost in a character, and then, or even just whatever role I seem to be playing in a room. I think my personality type is I tend to adapt to whatever I think the room requires me to be. And while that may be helpful as a performer, I think it inhibits me from really having a true sense of self-awareness or identity. And I think Jonah in Never Have I Ever is definitely the closest to home that I've hit. And I think it might be because he's a significantly, probably more of a minor role on the show. So there's a lot more backstory that I get to be aware of that the audience doesn't necessarily know. But it's fun to get little nuggets of truth from the writers, just the more as it goes on. And I think that kind of is a double-edged sword, because people who only get to see the sides that make the final edit will have their opinions, and they'll say, oh, he's just playing a stereotype or whatever. But I'm like, you only get to see what that one take that was chosen is. And for me, it's about like a whole experience of every take and like what that brings out in the character, and then also inevitably what I'm bringing to the character. I think it's definitely taught me how valuable it is to know who I really am. I think, like I said, it's so easy to get lost in every character that you play and to let that sort of define who I think I am, because I'm just so used to trying to walk into a room and sell myself as whatever I think someone needs me to be. And the more I get to know what interests me and what fills my cup, I think that inherently transpires into healthier relationships with people, because, you know, authenticity, I think, is necessary for vulnerability and honest connections with other people. And I think if you're going to try to edit yourself too much or overproduce, then you're really getting in the way of having some pretty wild and genuine experiences. I definitely identify myself as a bit of an ambivert, and I think that that's probably making me an equal byproduct of both of my parents, in that, like, I love human interaction. I definitely need to have some sort of conversation with someone at least once a day, which was something I learned specifically in quarantine, because I had to make time to either have an extended phone call with a loved one or a friend. And I also enjoy my downtime, and I think that was something that my puppy made me very aware of, just because I realized how much I was able to re-energize when I was just left to my own thoughts. And I think that is a delicate balance, because if you're left alone too long, then things can spiral. But I do feel like I'm someone who processes my thoughts better out loud with someone, which is why I think I really respond to talk therapy. And I think I really know if someone's going to be a close friend, depending on how quickly we can go below the surface and have a deep conversation. And pleasantries get a little difficult for me, but I think having probably more meaningful conversations is a great way for me to get a clearer idea of what's going on in my head. The first thing that comes to mind is the polarized political climate that we're going through. I did come from a pretty conservative background, and growing up as someone who felt almost unaware of that, and like I felt like my family had pretty liberal and accepting and very loving attitudes, to see people suddenly show a different side of their personalities felt very isolating, and it felt like it undermined a lot of my own self-identity. And then I think to take a little bit more responsibility for keeping myself informed as far as where I stand on things has kind of offered some sort of release in that stress. On vacation. When I'm cold, laughing. Right now, that I'd probably rather be sitting on a couch. When someone invites me to, I feel like that it's always easier to be honest with someone when they are vulnerable with you. And I think when somebody is willing to share of themselves, it just creates a space where you feel safe, like, to reciprocate.